Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. If you're watching this on Spotify, I have my video on so you guys can see me today. Hi, this is me. I am Renisha Rennie. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Happy to have you here. Today, I really just wanted to come on and give an update and talk a little bit about vulnerability. So, I mentioned in the past couple episodes that I've been struggling with a depressive episode. Um, and for those of you who are new, I'm sure you probably know by the title and description, but I am diagnosed with BPD, borderline personality disorder. I've also been diagnosed with severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder. Um, I've been mentioned having ADHD, CPTSD, lots of things, and I've also in the past struggled with panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and a number of things. Excuse me. um, and this podcast is very casual. I don't really edit it much, which is why you could hear my sneeze just now. And I want to keep it authentic and I want to keep it conversational and I want it to feel like you're talking to a friend or someone that you know. So, with the hopes that those of you who also struggle feel less alone, and those of you who maybe have people in your life who you love who struggle with BPD or other severe mental illnesses, that this can give you a little bit more context and nuance about what living with those disorders, I hate the term disorder, but what those illnesses are like. And yeah, so going back to what I was mentioning, I wanted to just recap, just update where I'm at right now, and also just talk a little bit about vulnerability and the critical role I think that that plays in recovery, mental health recovery. So, yeah, to start, as I mentioned, I'd been in a depressive episode for, I don't even know how long now. It's lasted longer. Um, than I think previous depressive episodes recently, because I will say that I feel like my mental health has improved a lot, but I still struggle with the ups and downs, and I I'm feeling a lot better today, and I want to reflect on that because one thing that I've noticed is that I'm an isolator, so, and I'm also an introvert. So when I have these bouts of depression, I'm very irritable. I don't want to really talk to people. I want to kind of withdraw and stay to myself and do things that just make me feel comfortable, make me feel safe. Um, but the issue with that is oftentimes staying alone, withdrawing can cause me to spiral because then I have all this time to just be in my head and spiraling, and my thoughts can be really negative, and I have a lot of um, intrusive thoughts. Suicidal ideation is something I've struggled with a lot throughout the years. And so when I'm withdrawing and isolating, and especially if I'm like doom scrolling, it's very easy for me to spiral, for my mind to take that, to just go down. um, and last night and yesterday, actually, I I had this feeling that I should go out and do something social, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to, right? Because part of depression is not having interest in things or feeling lethargic, feeling low energy, and again, wanting to isolate and be alone. I also have road anxiety, so driving places is not particularly something I really want to do. Um, so I was like, oh, I don't know. I just don't want to leave the house, but at the same time I just had the strong desire to get out because I knew it would be good for me. I found that going out into the sun, into nature helps me particularly. But I just decided to post and share a little bit more about myself because the night prior I did go out and I realized there was a lot of ways in which, I'm connecting with people, I'm having opportunities to deepen connections and make friends. But I even when I'm out and I'm trying to connect, I'm still withdrawing in some capacity because I'm not really sharing. And I think that if you struggle with severe mental illness, one thing you might struggle with is like just this fear of getting close to people, like genuinely getting closer connections, because you fear maybe you'll have an episode, or, you know, there's like a lot of things that could go wrong, right? And especially if you're someone who in the past you've had relationships and friendships that just didn't work out, then you have like trust issues on top of it. And so there's just all these reasons why you're afraid to kind of open up. And I'm one of those people. I don't have like a lot of close friends, and I am really afraid, honestly, and anxious about opening up and really getting close to people and letting people in. And I've been connecting with so many great people. And I realize there's so much that I share on Instagram and on my podcast about mental health, but I am not being 100% open. And the reason why I created this podcast, the reason why I created my Instagram page and TikTok, is so that I could have a space where I'm being authentic, where I'm showing up as myself. Because for me, I feel like that's been incredibly healing. Like that's been a big part of my healing journey, is being able to show up as my full self and be honest about what's going on in my head, and where I'm at mentally and emotionally. And so I decided I was going to share a little bit about myself on my Instagram story, which I did. And I just talked a little bit, not like in great detail, about just some of my experiences throughout my life that have, in my opinion, contributed to my poor mental health and just some of the things that I struggle with now. So I did that, and I decided to spontaneously like go to the beach with some friends, and it was so healing, and I was overwhelmed with the amount of love and support. And it brought up so many thoughts for me, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about that here. If you have borderline personality disorder or BPD, you might have heard of what's called an FP, or favorite person. And for a couple of years now, I've been remarried, and I came to the realization that I tend to rely on my romantic partners for all of my emotional needs. And I think that because I've never been in a space where I feel like I've had my emotional needs met, and also because I've never been taught to take care of my own emotional needs, and it's something that I'm having to learn now. Um, I realized that I was conflating emotional support with basically emotional labor. And I think that that is a trait that we can have sometimes as people with BPD, is we put very high expectations on our favorite person. Um, we I think if there's someone that we feel safe with, it's kind of, at least in my experience, I can only speak from my experience. And if I've found someone that I can feel safe with, which who for me is my husband, I feel like without intending to, I dump a lot on them, and I also have high expectations. And it's like if they, they're a human too, they're living their life too. If they don't have the capacity to show up for me in the way that I expect them to or want them to, then I can split. And for those who don't know what splitting is, it's very black and white thinking. It looks different for different people. The way that we react looks different. But for me, when I split, I kind of go into the state of thinking, this all or nothing thinking of like someone who loves me, suddenly they don't care about me at all. They hate me, they don't care about me. And in fact, they're out to get me. Like my mind just goes completely opposite of the truth a lot of times. And it's painful to experience, and it's something that is it's very harmful, not only for the people around us but for us too. And I think that's something that I don't hear people talk about as much. A lot of times the rhetoric is on how our behaviors when we're splitting impact those around us, which is valid and fair. But I think I want to provide more insight into what's happening there. Um, and so for me, a lot of times my brain kind of just misinterprets a response that I didn't particularly like, especially if I'm feeling vulnerable enough with this person I feel safe with to share the truth about what I'm feeling. Because I think a lot of times we don't feel like we have safe spaces or people around us that we can share these thoughts and feelings with. So when we find an FP, it's such a big deal, because now we have someone, right? Now we have someone we can trust. We can be our full selves around. We can express our true feelings. And then if we do that, it's not easy for us to do that. So when we do that and they have a reaction we don't particularly like, then that can, lead to a lot of those like fight or flight, trauma responses, behaviors that are not pretty and often harmful, both to ourselves and to the people that we love and care about. And so I realized that I needed to learn how to be vulnerable and how to allow myself to have connections with other people and not have one person be my sole person. And also the ways in which I need to learn how to provide that validation for myself, um, give myself permission to feel what I need to feel, and feel safe with myself. So feeling safe with myself. Sorry, cannot say words. Feeling safe with myself, and also allowing myself to connect with others so that I can allow in more love and more support, so that I'm not just going back and putting all of this pressure and all of these expectations on just one person. One person cannot meet your needs. One person should not be expected to meet your needs. And I truly think that it will be beneficial in the healing and recovery journey to tap into community, to build connections with multiple people, and to deepen your relationship and connections with yourself as well. I think that a combination, in a lot of rhetoric, we hear kind of one or the other, this or that's that. I think holistically, you need all of these things, right? You need community, you need friendships, you need relationships, um, you need to deepen your connection with yourself. You need to feel safe within yourself. So I think all of those things are important. And I think that historically for me, I have subconsciously kind of attached all of that to one person. And that person's like my end all be all now, right? And I'm relying on that person for all of my joy and happiness. And that's too much pressure for somebody, right? Um, And so what happens then is when they are inevitably a human being and they make mistakes or they do something that might hurt you or they say something that you maybe didn't want to hear, boom, now you feel unsafe. Now it's like you're way on the other side of the spectrum and it's not sustainable. And so I realized that as I was in this depressive episode, I started to split again on my partner and I was having a hard time. And he has hard times too. And sometimes when I'm like this, I can't fully like show up for him. And so I was reflecting because it'd been a really hard week. And I just decided to share that. I just decided to share more of myself with the people that I've connected with recently, who I feel that I can trust, which is very new for me, and who I feel like really want to be there and really want to support. And the response was so affirming for me because it proved to me that yes, there are other people out there who want to be there for me, who want to see me do well, who do support me, and that one, I don't have to rely solely on one person. I shouldn't rely solely on one person. I shouldn't just rely on my favorite person for all these needs. Two, I don't have to do it alone because as someone who withdraws, that's something that I'm usually inclined to do is again with this black or white thinking is like, oh, if I don't have this person that I want to support me, then I have nobody. And then in some ways I'm abandoning myself because now I'm running away and I'm, numbing myself out or whatever it is that I'm doing, instead of just sitting with myself and sitting with my emotions. And so, um, learning how to be there for myself, but also not shutting out everyone else and having this black and white thinking of like, I have to do this alone. Um, and just allowing and accepting support from other places. I remember I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it was Balanced Black Girl, but I'm not sure. I think so though, because I've been listening to that podcast a lot. So shout out to them. I love that podcast. But they were talking about, I've been listening to a lot of podcast episodes about friendships and relationships because this has been so top of mind for me. But they were talking about how people who are mentally healthier or emotionally healthier, I believe, have different friends for different things, and they don't just like rely on one or two people to fulfill all these needs. Like they have their friends that they go see at yoga, or they have their friends that they see at school, and like people who have kind of like that balance or that variety are actually happier people. And I thought that was interesting because I know there's so much rhetoric online about how relationships and connections, like, oh, you want low effort friend, or you don't want low effort friends, or you do want low effort friends, or um, this friend doesn't show up for you in XYZ way, so they're not your friend. And I'm like, we all are different people with different lives and different capacities and different needs. Um, and I'm learning that it is important to have different types of friendships and different types of relationships. If you have friends that you just go see just to have fun, that's fine. As long as it's not something that you feel like is hindering your progress and growth, then that's fine. If you have people that you connect with only in work settings, but they bring you so much joy in those work settings, that's fine. And so I'm really learning that for recovery, tapping into that is important. I know that I'm the type of person that really needs deep connections. And I think that that's why I've had so many issues in relations with my like favorite person, is because like I expect so much. Like I'm always wanting to deepen connections and understand people more. And I expect so much from them. And I forget that other people are different people and they have different needs and different ways they need to connect too. And oftentimes when we get in relationships and when we connect with our favorite person, that doesn't mean that they have the same communication styles. They usually often don't have the same communication styles. They don't always have the same like needs or like emotional needs, or even the way that the capacity they have to show up in relationships isn't always the same. So when we're putting all these expectations, we could be setting ourselves up for more distress. And I'm realizing that in a lot of ways, yes, my partner has made me feel so safe, but in some ways we are very different. And instead of being upset and splitting and like having these fight or flight reactions to those differences and perceiving those differences as a threat to my emotional well-being, um, I know that I have connected with other people and other friendships and other connections that do nurture that side of my being, because we aren't one-dimensional people. We have different parts of who we are, right? And we cannot, in my opinion, I don't think it's helpful for us to put the pressure on just the one person. And I think this goes even for if you don't have BPD or any other mental health issue. I think that even if you're in a relationship or a marriage and you're like, well, I really like to read books, but my partner hates reading and he doesn't want to read. He just wants to talk about sports, or they just want to talk about sports. Let them. Let them. We are not the same people. Go find your friends that like to read books and start a book club and be with them, and be open to those people in that space and share that part of yourself in that space. I think that it's fantastic if we find someone that just ticks all the boxes and just like, every part of our being to connect with. I think that's rare. And if you find that, that's such a blessing. But I think that it's equally as important, and I'm realizing, to be open enough and be vulnerable enough to open yourself to the idea of other connections. And I think that's something that can be really, really hard to do if you struggle with BPD or severe mental issues, where you are already fearful going into connections. And if you find one person that makes you feel safe, it's like you cling to that. And that's like all you have now. I just cannot express how transformative it's been for me to allow myself to be open to and not sabotage the new connections that are coming into my life. Um, the past year, so much has changed for me in terms of my relationships, and I've touched on this in previous episodes. But the one thing that I realized, and the reason why I'm even talking about this now, is that I wasn't fully opening myself. I realized that every time I had the opportunity to deepen connections and new friendships, I would kind of self sabotage. I would go back to isolating. I would kind of run away. And it was like I wasn't fully allowing myself to do that. And so now I'm going back to what feels safe for me. and expecting my favorite person to kind of meet all those needs and support me in all these different ways, when here are other opportunities for me to connect and for me to feel supported and for me to feel loved and to feel seen. And it's almost like now I'm denying myself those opportunities out of fear. And so the reason why I even wanted to really bring this topic up is because I want to just really express how powerful it is to allow yourself to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to open up to new connections. Um, because, yes, with any new relationship, any new connection, there is an opportunity, there's a possibility that you could get hurt. There's a possibility you could get disappointed or let down. But on the other side of that, there's also a possibility that you could feel more loved, more supported, and that could just deepen your connections with other people, deepen your connections with yourself, and help you have more support in your own healing and recovery, and help you also recognize the ways in which you can pour love into other people, where you can show up and positively impact other people's lives. I think the more I've connected with others and the more people have told me, I'm grateful for this aspect of your personality, I'm grateful for this, that is incredibly helpful for me as someone who struggles so much mentally. There are these cycles of me for kind of forgetting that, right? Because when we go through these lulls and we go through these depressive episodes, we do forget the good parts of who we are. We spiral, and it can be hard, and it's nice to have people around that remind you, hey, I feel good when you say this to me, or I like how you hold space for me, and I like how you allow me to feel heard. I've been told that I am like a good listener, and people feel safe sharing with me. And it's interesting because for a long time I didn't feel that way, and I think that when I was in a very like emotionally unstable state and I was with people who I didn't feel safe around, I didn't make people feel that way. And so I internalized a lot of that as just me being the type of person that doesn't make people feel seen, right? I was starting to see myself as someone who was a bad person. People don't feel like they can talk to me. When really what it was is I was in environments where I didn't feel safe. I was in relationships where I didn't feel safe. And so I could not respond from a place that I think is actually more authentic to who I actually am, apart from like these trauma responses, right? When I feel safe, when I feel stable, emotionally stable and regulated, I am the type of person that is a good listener. I am the type of person that always tries to hold space for people to show up as their authentic self. And I think when you have connections with more people and you have like a community of people, they remind you of that. And I think, historically speaking, too, a lot of indigenous cultures, a lot of cultures that have been historically been colonized, like I'm a black woman, people from a lot of indigenous populations, in our background and in our ancestry, they healed and they worked together and they grew together in community. That is the norm. Now we live in a very that was the norm. Now we live in a very individualistic society, right? So it's almost like we are taught, or we've internalized, that we don't need to rely on each other. We don't need to go to each other for support. And I can't stress enough how much I've realized in the past year just how wrong that is, and how we do need each other. We do need community. I think humans are just like innately connected to one another. This is why we have relationships. This is why we want to have friendships. This is why we tend to congregate together in likeness. When we have things in common, we tend to like automatically come together. It's just something we do innately as human beings. We are made to be connected. That's what we are wired to do. So to think that we have to do it all alone, or to think that we only need one person, one favorite person, no, we need to be in community. And in order to do that, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to not deny ourselves of these opportunities when they arise. We have to be willing to take risks because, like I said, there's always a possibility that things don't work out. But that doesn't mean that there's not something to glean from it. There aren't lessons to learn from it. And there's not opportunity for growth from it. And of course, I recommend people taking all the steps and all of these, like, all of this is a process. So I recommend people connecting when they feel safe to do so, when they feel like they're in a place and they have the capacity to do so. I don't want this to come across as like I'm pushing people. If you're in a place where you need to take a step back and be with yourself, I've been there. I've been there for the past couple of years. I had to do that. I think it's very transformative to do that. But I just also want to stress that there are people out there. There are other people out there who want to support you, who want to get to know you, who have love to give you, and it's up to us to be open to that and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, because fear and anxiety can really hold us back from connections that can be incredibly healing. And so, yeah, that's really what I wanted to come on to say today. I really wanted to stress that because I've just been really overwhelmed with the support that I've received just in the past 24 hours after having such a hard mental health week. I wasn't even sure if I was going to record because I wasn't sure I was going to feel well after this weekend, but I did have to push myself a little bit, and I'm glad that I did. And so, if you're listening and you're struggling and you're feeling alone, I just want you to know that even if it's hard for you to believe it, even if your mind will try to convince you otherwise, I promise you, someone out there wants to get to know you. Someone out there wants to support you. Someone out there wants to love you. And whether you find these people in online communities, whether you build up the confidence and feel safe enough to start to explore it out in the world, I hope that you are able to find and connect with those people, because it's so transformative and healing and life changing to know that there are people, multiple people out there rooting for you, especially if, like me, you come from a background or a family where you feel like you don't have that. I personally don't feel like I have like relatives or family members. I don't have parents that I feel like I can talk to. My father passed away. I've been rebuilding a relationship with my mom, who I love, but I still often feel like sometimes when I talk to family, it kind of just turns into a vent session for them. And again, I like that I'm a safe space where people can open up, but a lot of times I don't feel like I get to express what I want to say, or I don't get to show up with my family and really tell them where I'm at. Not truly, not honestly. I don't feel like they have really learned how to be great listeners when it comes to stuff like that. Um, and so having friends and having community where it's like I can actually be the person to share and people are there to support me rather than me just kind of, either isolating, being withdrawn, or just being the person people dump their problems to without me being able to share. I'm grateful that now I'm finding spaces where I can do that. And I'm realizing just how incredibly healing it is to have that. It's necessary, right? It's necessary. And if you don't have parents, if you don't have people around you to provide that for you, I promise you, someone out there in the world will. There are so many people on this planet. Someone out there will be there for you. Multiple people will be there for you. And I hope that you find them. So if you've listened up until now, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate everyone who listens. This is by no means a huge podcast, and usually, as you can see, just coming on and just sharing thoughts. A lot of it's unscripted, and just me showing up as my authentic self and sharing where I'm at with my journey in the hopes that other people out there feel less alone. So, yeah. Thank you so much. And if you want to connect with me, again, as I always say, I encourage you to connect with me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok unless it gets banned. And till next time, bye.